If I asked you to choose from one of these, a happy life or a crappy life, which one would you choose?
Happy.
Happy life. How about you? Which one would you choose?
A happy life.
A happy life? How about somebody over here? Happy life or a crappy life?
Happy life.
A happy life. Is it safe to say that everybody here would choose a happy life? Is there anybody that would choose a crappy life over a happy life? Of course not. So let me ask you this. Why is it that there are over 1 million posts on social media that say that happiness is a choice? Is it really that simple? I've often wondered why some people seem to be miserable anytime things don't go their way. It's like they get stuck. And other people can go through horrible tragedies and still seem happy. They have every reason to be stuck, but they're not. It's important to me to be able to help people get unstuck because I spent most of my life feeling stuck. And now that I've got myself moving again, I know that freedom that I've experienced, and I want everybody to be able to experience that same type of freedom.
When I talk about my bucket list, I encourage people to get up off their seat, get off their couch, go out that door, go do some dancing, go take a class that they wanted to. I help people get unstuck, and I love it.
If I get to help one person by sharing what I've been through, it's all worth it.
I do not want to be known as a person that has preached and taught kids to never give up. And I ended up giving up. I'm not going to be that defeated person. So I hope that today, all of you here today, find a way. If you're stuck in your life somehow, some way, you find it within yourself to get unstuck.
It was the early 90s. I was in college. I was going to a lot of different seminars and watching programs on TV, trying to figure out like how I can make myself happier. And I kept hearing people talk about, if you do this, you'll be happy. If you do that, you'll be happy, you know, and it seemed like they were all saying the same thing, but selling something different. And I realized there had to be more to this idea of happiness. So I actually sat down one day and just started writing out all the different things I was hearing, putting them on Post-it notes and laying them out on my floor. And then I decided, okay, the one concept that stood out to me was this concept of the ideal self versus actual self. So what you want versus what you have. So I started putting those Post-it notes into piles based on what they had in common. And in the end, I looked and I had 5 piles. And I realized that those are really the 5 areas that encompass all of our expectations. So I took those, created a graph, so now I can graph anybody's life in a couple minutes and see just how happy you are and in what areas of your life to focus on. The 5 areas of our lives that we all have expectations in are people, our relationships, responsibilities, which I consider that to be like your sense of purpose, activities, the things you do for fun, finances, and your environment, your personal space. I believe that we can help anyone get unstuck if they're ready and willing. A lot of people just don't see what's right in front of them. But one of the reasons why the graph system works so well is there's no magic behind it. You're literally telling me where your gaps are. I'm just pointing them out to you. And so by pointing them out, you know, that's the easy part. The hard part is you still have to go back and implement strategies to narrow those gaps. We just help guide you through it. So the thing about getting unstuck, it really is a process. What I've realized is that quite often we get so focused on that one thing that we think is wrong in our lives. And quite often it's a lot more than just one thing. For example, we get so focused on one problem we have, and you know that if you stare at anything long enough, it starts to seem bigger than it appears. Same's true with our problems. I'm so focused on my one problem that it starts to look bigger. But quite often we miss the peripheral stuff. So I'm so focused on the money issue that I'm having, I don't realize the relationships in my life are falling apart and my environment begins to get cluttered and things like that. So the process works because it looks at your life as a whole rather than just focusing on your one problem.
Do you have a major life circumstance that you felt stuck from and knew specific ways for you to get out of it?
I think everyone has a sad story. Everyone has a story that has affected them in many ways. Trauma, I think, is underestimated. I think that we've all suffered many traumas in our life, and I think that it takes a lot of responsibility to accept first that you've had that trauma and then to receive healing. But I think that when you become stuck in your trauma, it becomes something else, like a depression, like a disease, like a cancer.
Now I get it. We all have our share of trials and tragedies. We all get stuck. But how long you stay stuck is up to you. Now, I don't say that to diminish anything that you might be going through. Believe me, I understand. I get it. I've been there. In my own life, I experienced a great deal of tragedy in a very short time. And it took me a very long time before I was able to see hope again. I want my long road to be your shortcut. June of 2008, I got married for the first time. And exactly 3 months to the day when I was married, we found out that we were expecting my first child. I was super excited. I couldn't wait to tell everybody I was finally going to be a dad. I called my family back in Ohio to tell them the good news. It was a Saturday. Later that night, my mom called me back and told me she just knew that I was going to have a daughter, and she couldn't wait to watch me have to deal with that for the next 18 years. Less than 36 hours later, Monday morning, I was at work. My phone was ringing nonstop. Turns out my mom was at work on a break telling people that I was going to have a baby. And on the way back to her desk, she collapsed and died of a heart attack at the age of 54. That wasn't supposed to happen. It was a shock, expected her to be there, especially in this time, really exciting time in my life. But I handled it pretty much the same way I handled everything at that time. I put it behind me and moved on. I had to focus on what was important. I was going to be a dad, so I really didn't deal with the emotions around my mom's passing right away. Try to get life back to normal as quick as possible. Then we started having some complications with the pregnancy. And at about 20 weeks, we were told that there was a possibility that she could have Down syndrome or something like that. And eventually they told us that they thought it was spina bifida. And at 37 weeks, they told us they wanted to have a test done to see how developed my daughter's lungs were. We decided not to have an amnio done early on because we weren't going to terminate the pregnancy no matter what. And they were trying to convince us that if it was Down syndrome that we should terminate. We're like, that's totally not an option. So at 37 weeks, though, we had to have the amnio done just to make sure that her lungs were developed. Turned out that she had a case of trisomy 18, which is like a 1 in a million genetic disorder, and it's terminal. So we went into the hospital and delivered her like the next day. It was a tough time. We had a hard time finding a hospital that would take us because we decided we were going to do comfort care. We knew that it was terminal. We knew there was nothing that we could do. We were kind of putting it in God's hands at that point. Like, we're not going to give her any kind of feeding tubes or life support. We're just, take care of her naturally. And a lot of the hospitals didn't want to hear that. So when we got into the hospital, it was chaotic. They only had 2 patients on the hall, but nobody wanted to deal with us at all. At one point, they came to us and told us that, we were not cooperating. We needed to hurry up and get in there and have the baby. And they wanted to induce labor and everything. So it was a very challenging time. We weren't sure if my daughter was going to be born alive or not. And I still remember the moment she was born. It was like a scene out of a movie. We had music blaring in the background and, room full of doctors and nurses all wondering if this baby was going to be stillborn or not. And the moment she started crying, the whole room just erupted. It was a pretty awesome memory. And she did great. She was thriving. And in fact, they even had to go back and do more tests to make sure that she actually had trisomy because she was doing so well. And she hung in there for 42 hours. And during that time, it was just, I experienced every emotion known to man. You know, proud father, excited, scared, nervous, questioning everything. But I think during that time, it's interesting how we just kind of all came together, and I was really proud of the way everybody handled it. It wasn't until I got home that things started to fall apart. Eventually, I decided to sit down and write out everything I knew about happiness. And that's when I developed my first book. It was called Finding Your Happiness, which was kind of ironic because I wasn't happy. But see, I wrote that book for me. I was trying to find my own happiness at the time. So I started speaking and writing, and next thing you know, I'm meeting all of these people who had these amazing stories. And I thought back at my own life and how miserable I was for years, and I know a lot of other people that were unhappy as well. And so I have these people in my life who are unhappy, and I start meeting these other people who have these amazing stories. They have every reason in the world to be unhappy, but they're not, right? They're actually out there sharing their mess to success stories with others. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if the people in my life who were struggling, who were feeling stuck, can hear from these new friends of mine who had every reason to be stuck, but they weren't. And that is when I got the idea to hold the Unstuck Happiness Conference.
So this Unstuck Happiness Conference is pretty amazing.
We all have our own story to tell, so to never be afraid of sharing it, to putting yourself out there, because ultimately, what is fear besides our self-limitation? So I love this conference.
It was just a couple of months before I got the idea for the Unstuck Happiness Conference when I met Eddie Garcia for the first time. We were at a National Speakers Association meeting, and when Eddie came walking in, it's obvious that he has a story. I just had to meet him. We hit it off right away. We had a lot in common. We were both former teachers and coaches. We knew a lot of the same people. He was just a really neat guy to talk to. After about a minute, I completely forgot that he had a disability at all. And then when I got the idea to do the Unstuck Happiness Conference, the first person I called was Eddie Garcia. I just knew he had to be a part of this.
I was actually administrator for the Clark County School District, and I thought I had the flu one day. I'm supervising lunch, and I rarely, if ever, go home. And the way I was feeling, I was getting incrementally sicker, and I'm talking about like by the minute. And before I knew it, I just finally had to ask for, I've got to go home, and so I told my supervisor, and they says, go home, and if you don't feel well tomorrow, don't come back, and we'll figure it out later. Well, sure enough, I went home and I literally passed out, and I didn't know why. I didn't understand. I just thought I had the flu, fell asleep, and didn't really wake up until the next day. And when I woke up the next day, I knew something was terribly wrong. And my wife was at work, and I eventually had to text her, tell her, you got to get me to the hospital now. Yeah. And when she got me to we went to one of those like urgent care clinics first, and when I got there, I passed out again. And I'm being revived by nurses who they then did emergency blood work. They found out I was in renal failure, kidney failure, and I was being admitted into the hospital immediately. And they didn't know why. And it took about 3 days to figure out that I had contracted a flesh-eating bacteria in my thigh. And the bacteria got into my blood. It became septic. And basically... they said, the standard is, you have a 20% chance of survival from after contracting, flesh-eating bacteria. And if you do survive it, chances are you're going to lose limbs. Well, after speaking with some of the nurses, they were telling me that most patients have a drip of IV in their IVs and stuff like that. When they see about 4 drips, they already automatically assume the worst. They think, he's not going to make it. I was beyond 4 drips a minute, which, there's almost 0% chance of survival. And the great thing about it is, you know, the whole story, I survived after 3 surgeries to try to remove it when I wasn't supposed to survive one. And, you know, I'm here to tell my story. The only casualty was I lost my hands and feet. But, you know, if I want to look at the bad side, and about losing my hands and feet instead of the good, that I'm still here today, being able to do the stuff that I'm still doing, my wife, my children, all that stuff. I mean, you know what? If you were to tell me, you know, death or lose your hands and feet, you know what? Yeah, I know it kind of sounds, you know, maybe morbid or what have you, but I would lose my hands and feet over anything else that could happen to me, just so I could be with my children and my wife.
So I was wondering if you've ever had a moment in life where you have felt stuck.
Of course. I think we're all figuring that out at one point or another, and then you're just trying to change gears. I think in a certain point of life, you try to reevaluate, and you understand that you aren't where you thought you were going to be at 30. There's a lot of women with long-term careers and children and husbands and houses, and so you do start to feel stuck when you compare yourself to others. And I think there's an issue with this Instagram scenario in which you only get to see people's highlight reels.
You know, it's really hard to tell whether or not somebody is stuck because we all have very different symptoms. Some people, it's business as usual, and you can never tell that they're stuck. They'll never address it. Life goes on. Other people become very sad, depressed, lonely. Some look for distractions, anything to keep their mind off of it for a while. They'll use humor to deflect. I mean, we really use a variety of different strategies to avoid dealing with our issues in life. And so, you know, in my own case, I didn't realize how stuck I was because I just tried to get life back to normal as quickly as possible. It was when I sat and did the work, I realized how stuck I was. So when I got home, I tried to put it behind me, try to get life back to normal as quickly as possible. Thing is, there would be no normal again. What I did was just went right back to work, right back to life as I'd always done it. A couple things that I did, you know, just for myself is I started exercising. I was running like every day, and that was my own therapy. So I was running every day, didn't change the way I ate or anything. And before I knew it, I realized I gained 50 pounds. What my body was telling me was that I was depressed. I just didn't feel depressed. So I suffer from what I now refer to as a functional depression, like a functional alcoholic. I was still living life as normal. You couldn't tell I was depressed, but I realized my body was responding differently, and I started alienating everyone around me. I was just grumpy and difficult to be around at that time. And it lasted for about 5 years until I found myself alone and miserable. And I knew something had to change. I mentioned I'd created the graph system 20 some years ago, but I hadn't really done anything with it. I actually hadn't looked at it in at least 10 years. And then I ran across somebody who was really struggling. It was a 21-year-old guy who was a nightclub promoter. He was just having a really hard time. And as I sat and listened to him, he started telling me how he needed more money in his life. He needed a new job so he can make more money. And I thought, you know what? Let me try this. And I pulled out a napkin and graphed his happiness right there. And I realized he was right. He did need a new job, but it wasn't for the reasons he thought. See, he thought it was about the money, but when I looked at his graph on paper, his two biggest areas of discontent were in people and activities. What I realized was that all of the people in his life he'd met in the nightclub scene, and all of his activities revolved around drinking because that's where he met. So by finding a new job, he was able to meet new people, have new experiences, and from there, just be able to have more of a purpose and enjoy life more. And afterwards, I realized, well, if I can help him, why am I not helping myself? When I look back on that period of my life now, I can see the emotions that I was going through. I just couldn't tell at the time. While I was going through it, I didn't feel like I was depressed. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel anything. It was kind of numb. But people around me could see it. They were pointing it out to me, and I just wrote it off as, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm not depressed. I'm not angry. I'm fine. And it was, I think, as an athlete growing up, the one strategy that I learned is shake it off and get back in the game. right? You don't show weakness. And so that's what I did. When I got home, okay, shake it off, get back to life as quick as possible. But clearly I was angry. Clearly I had some issues that I hadn't worked through. I had not taken any time to even deal with my mom's passing, let alone my daughter's. And so looking back, I can see the anger, the resentment, the denial, the depression. I just had no clue what was going on at the time.
It takes time, and it takes dedication, and it takes work, and then one day you just wake up and you know whatever you're doing is right or wrong.
The process that I went through to get unstuck was interesting because I had the knowledge in my head, and I started writing about it before I started living it. So as I started writing about it, and then I would speak about what I wrote about, it was as if I had started living it, but I didn't know. Like, all these opportunities started opening themselves up to me, which I wasn't expecting. So I wrote this book just for me, and before I know it, I had other people wanting to read it. And then I had somebody ask me if I would be on their radio show. And then after that, they liked the radio interview so much, they asked me to host my own show. And so before I know it, I'm hosting a radio show about being happy. And I'm like, I was never happy. And here I am hosting a happiness radio show. And it was like, everything happened so quick. But it was like I finally stepped into that element where I just started owning my experiences and owning the information that I had. And working through that process just opened up so many doors for me. It was pretty awesome. When I first decided to look into the speaking business, I found a networking group for professional speakers. It was about the third or fourth meeting when a new guy showed up. He was talking about how he wanted to share how his bucket list lifestyle was helping him get through chemotherapy and deal with cancer. I remember the facilitator at the time telling him that you just need to find somebody that's a little further ahead than you that's already speaking and partner with them. I stood right up and said, you know what, he'll be working with me. Problem was, I wasn't actually working yet, and I hadn't met the guy. But I just knew that there was a synergy there. Shortly after that, I was asked to host my radio show, the Finding Your Happiness Show, and Dale Krause was the very first guest on the Finding Your Happiness radio show. Dale also was instrumental in helping with the very first 2 Unstuck Happiness conferences.
Thank you. My name is Dale Krause, Mr. Bucket List. I wanted to welcome all of you here today. It's so good to be here. I love being able to just wake up and go, I stole another day. And I live each and every day, well, kind of like, a rental car with full insurance, If you can get all 4 tires off the ground, I'm going to do it. So, I checked off 13 bucket list items in 1 year. The following year, 26. It was amazing. I love living this bucket list lifestyle. I would like to tell you a little bit about how I kind of got this bucket list thing started and doing all these fun things. Is it okay if I share with you a little bit about how this all started? It's a really good story. So, let me go on to 2008, 2009. Does anybody remember the bust? The big old housing bust? You lose a home. I lost my home. And you're like, Dale, Las Vegas, like 70% of people lost their home. No big deal. But there's still those feelings and emotions when you're like, I've accomplished, I'm moving up and climbing the ladder. And then, bam, downsize. You have to let things go, downsize again, let things go, your possessions. And I got that followed up by, the economy kind of went down. I walked away from my business partners. I had a different plan than what they wanted, and I went off on my own. Follow that by a divorce. Those are always fun. Another clean slate. So, in a matter of 2 to 3 years, lost my home, lost my business, lost my marriage and family. As a man, I'm like, I'm the support, head of the household, And when those titles kind of get ripped from you, it'll take you back. It'll throw you down. And just after all that, I get diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in 2012. So I don't know how many bullets are in this gun, but buck it all. I got to work on my bucket list.
Any advice for someone who might be stuck in life? How can they get out of it?
Find your passion in life and just continually follow that passion. Like, work toward it, keep going, just keep pushing toward your goal of your passion.
That's amazing. Can you tell us about a moment in your life where you've been really stuck?
Absolutely. I actually just lost my job this week, and so I'm kind of at a crossroads with my life of whether or not to follow my passion of photography or follow my career in the information technology business. So it's some key life decisions, but I'm not going to let it keep me down.
So do you think you'll use your own advice then to follow your passion maybe?
Absolutely. I mean, if I focus on the negative, I'm going to stay stuck in life. But if I look at this as an opportunity to actually chase my dreams, then I can. It gives me the motivation to keep going.
So I had the idea to do the Unstuck Happiness Conference. The thing is, I didn't have any of the resources or the expertise that I needed to pull it off. I just knew it was a good idea. I'm not a gambler, but I do love college football. So I went and made a college football bet, and I hit for like $600. I went to put the money in my pocket and thought, you know what? If I don't do this now, I never will. So I ran down to the Las Vegas Strip to a hotel there, and I'm like, give me the cheapest conference room you can give me for this money. I need to get this started. And March of 2016, we had our very first Unstuck Happiness Conference, which all started on a college football bet. One thing that I realized is that I had all the tools that I needed to get unstuck. What I lacked was the faith and belief that I could. And the idea of the Unstuck Happiness Conference allows people to come and hear stories from 8 to 10 other people who have been through some horrible tragedies, some great adversity, and have emerged to become leaders. So can you get unstuck on your own? You could, but having those stories to inspire you, to remind you that, you know, if they can do it, so can you. That's what makes the conference so special. Yeah. If you come to an Unstuck Happiness Conference, you're not going to be sold on a bunch of hype. It's not a rah-rah cheerleader conference. It is literally listening to people who have been through it. They're pouring out their heart, they're sharing their stories, and they're letting you know the strategies they use to get moving again. A lot of other conferences are all about getting you emotionally hyped and fired up, and which is great until somebody cuts you off in the parking lot. What we're looking at is like, how can we really create life change? Because we usually have 8 to 10 speakers at a conference, a lot of audience members are usually there to see a friend or somebody that they know speak. And without fail, they end up coming for one person, but are totally touched by somebody else's story. One of the conferences, I'd given my speech, told my story, and I was making my way back to the stage to make an announcement. And I had a woman just grab my arm. She's like, I need to talk to you. Great. She's like, well, I just came here to hear one of my friends speak. I wasn't even going to come today. I'm like, well, thanks for coming. I'm glad you're here. And she's like, no, I wasn't going to come today because today's my daughter's 21st birthday. I'm like, well, that's great. Happy birthday to your daughter. And I tried to walk away to get back to the stage, and she stopped me again. She's like, no, you don't understand. Today's my daughter's 21st birthday, but my daughter only lived for 2 days. And in the past 21 years, I haven't been able to say her name. She said, I came here to hear my friend, but I was meant here to hear your story. And we have stuff like that happen at every conference. It's just powerful the way things work together. There's something that you can get from every speaker, and everyone's going to be touched by a different story. What I love about the Unstuck Happiness Conferences are the wide variety of stories that we get. And we've had some amazing stories. In the very first Unstuck conference, we had 6 speakers scheduled to speak. But a couple weeks before that, I met Cheryl Green. Cheryl was going through the National Speakers Association Academy program, the same program I had graduated from just a few months before. And when I heard Cheryl's story, it was incredible. But what's really amazing about it is that you would never know. To see how she carried herself, you would never imagine that she had been through some of the experiences that she's had. So I asked Cheryl if she would be willing to do a cameo, a very short piece in the first Unstuck Happiness Conference. To this day, Cheryl is the only other person to speak at every Unstuck Happiness Conference, and she's a very important part of everything that we do at Unstuck.
So when I was 21, I met the guy. We were together for a couple of years before we finally got married. Back on July 8th of 2008, I was living with my husband and our dog Akasha in a beautiful house in High Point, North Carolina. We couldn't actually afford the house, and I hated my job. And my husband was hiding something that I had no idea was coming. But then I got the call. I answered my phone at work after not hearing from him all morning. And he said 4 words that completely changed my life. I'm in big trouble. My husband, along with 4 other school district employees, was caught in a sting operation. For the last 3 weeks, he had been talking to an undercover officer posing as a 13-year-old girl. I thought I had the perfect life. I thought I had the life that every woman dreams of. But it just fell apart.
I've been up against a lot at 60 years of age. So life-changing to me is I got a divorce after 27 years. Huge. I was stuck. And I've been single for 13 years because I think I've been comparing everybody else to her. Anyway, that's being stuck. Now I'm not stuck, so I'm just looking for the right one. And how you do that is forgiving yourself and moving on with life. That's what it's about. Forgive yourself for all that you do and move on with life.
I love that.
Good.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
We live in this information age. That means you have the answers to every question available at your fingertips 24/7. If you want to know how to make more money, get in shape, live the life of your dreams, the solutions are right there for us. So with that, we should all be healthy, happy, and hot, right? Well, see, the reason it took me so long to rebound from my own tragedies is because I was trying to get life back to normal as quickly as possible. I knew what to do. I'd actually been studying what makes people happy for like 20 years. I knew what to do, but when I tried to apply it, nothing seemed to work. Eventually, I decided to sit down and write out everything I knew about happiness, and that's when I developed my first book. Then I realized that there was some pretty good information in that book. There were some good strategies to help you get moving again. So I started doing a radio show and a series of workshops based on the content of that book, and people seemed to love it. The workshops especially were fun and informative. But I noticed after a while that the same people kept coming back, still talking about the same issues. See, we'd given them a solution, but no real life change was taking place yet. That's when I realized why we're not all healthy, happy, and hot. It's because cognitive solutions don't fix emotional problems. Let me say that again. Cognitive solutions do not fix emotional problems. Cognition is thinking, emotion is feeling. See, even though we know what to do, when we try to apply it, we get stuck. The reason we're getting stuck is because of emotional attachments we have to our past, which create our belief system, which are actually holding us back. That's when I decided to sit down and write my second book, The 40 Strategies to Living Unstuck. It's all about how to process those emotions so that the cognitive solutions have an opportunity to work. I realized that you can't find happiness and be stuck at the same time. I found my happiness. Now, it doesn't look anything like I ever imagined it would. In fact, if I had my choice, I'd have it the other way. I'd rather have my daughter. But what I've learned, no matter what roadblocks, detours, or collisions we're faced with, that there's happiness out there waiting for each and every one of us. But we have to be willing to pick ourselves up out of the wreckage that is our lives, turn and look in a new direction, move forward in faith, believing that things can work out, and opportunities will come our way, but they will never meet us back here in the middle of the wreckage. I've seen a lot of tragedy, but I think the greatest tragedy of all is the loss of hope. And hope is always future oriented. We all need a reason to get up in the morning, something to look forward to. I can remember when they first started putting backup cameras in vehicles, getting into a car with a group of people, and when that dashboard lit up, somebody said, that's really cool. Does that camera work when it's going forward too? And the owner of the car just looked over at him and said, yeah, there's a screen for when you're going forward. It's called the windshield. And I just thought, how quickly can we lose perspective? I mean, there's a reason why our windshield is so much larger than our rearview mirror or even the backup camera. That's because hope is in our future. It's out in front of us. It's not in the past. It's not in your rearview mirror. Now, the rearview mirror is important because it reminds us of where we come from and helps to keep us safe. But we're not navigating our vehicles through our rearview mirror. We shouldn't be navigating our lives that way either. We should be looking out into our future, out through that windshield. What inspires me and gives me hope is being able to help others find hope. In addition to the conferences, we started doing Moving Beyond retreats. It's 3 days of learning how to process the emotions that have been holding us back. And it's a beautiful thing when you can see people process those emotions and start to open up and share their stories. The very first retreat that I did was actually for people who were affected by the Route 91 Harvest Festival, the concert in Las Vegas where 58 people lost their lives. And to be able to be in a room with people who were there and witnessed the concert and who lost friends and loved ones, and to watch them be able to process and open up and start sharing their stories was such a beautiful thing. I was so blessed to be a part of that, and it forever changed my life as well. And to be able to coach people from adversity to influencer, and to take people from dealing with their pain to suddenly standing on stage and sharing their story, or hosting a podcast or writing a book. These are the things that give my life purpose and meaning. And I'm so grateful for this experience.
The best part was learning that it's okay to not be okay.
If you haven't been to an Unstuck seminar, go. John is incredible. You walk away with tools, tangible things that you can do to work through any situation in your life.
I've been saying not to give up for such a long time that I would hate that under these conditions, not having hands and feet, those kids that I've been telling for many years, don't ever give up. Follow your dreams. Do what you want to do. If something tough comes your way, a challenge, face it head on. And then this happened to me.
There's nothing that's ever going to stop me from coaching, not even using my hands and feet. My wife tells me that one of the first things I said when I came out of the coma was, I got to get up. I have to go coach. I still remember the first Saturday practice I had. Going back, I was on a walker. I was on prosthetic legs, and I'm like, people are going to see me different. They're gonna see me without hands, without feet. They're gonna say, how can you coach? How can you do it? Basketball and soccer, I found despite my disability, I found that very easy to coach because it was more a teaching aspect. But when it came to my passion of softball, I found that my disability created many challenges that I had to learn to overcome. What's funny is that because of some of the things that I've learned to overcome, it makes it hard to remember that, hey, you have trouble doing this or doing that. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was training my catcher the other day to learn to block the ball. You know what I did? I dumped a bucket of balls on the ground, probably, maybe 5-6 feet away, and I kicked them at her. Kicked them at her. So she had a block. But you know what? I don't even think that, because of my disability, there was a problem. So it's hard for me to see things that I don't think is a problem. All right, catchers, here we go. Boom, boom. So here, be a goalie. Boom, boom. I'm kicking it. But I don't think it's a disability. When I had hands, I was easily able to demonstrate the fundamentals of hitting. But when I ended up losing the hands, I had to come up with different ways of articulating what I wanted the kids to be able to do. What is it? Seatbelt. It's like putting on your seatbelt. So you've got to swing, and what's your front hand doing? It's throwing a frisbee. Your back hand is doing what? It's skipping a rock. There are things I can still do. For example, I can pitch soft toss to the kids. I'm able to get a ball and just put it on my nubs and then just toss it lightly, and it works well. I mean, I really don't feel that me not having hands is actually keeping me from doing it in such a way to help them become better. I met John at a national speakers conference, and right from the beginning there was a connection between us. Both him and I shared a career in education and coaching. And as our friendship grew and developed, John invited me to be a speaker at the very first Unstuck conference. And that was just an amazing experience to be on stage with so many people that shared their stories of how they became unstuck and by overcoming adversity. Because of my disability, what I try to do when I'm working with kids is I always try to incorporate humor.
This is a full restaurant at the time. Hey girls, look, it's Eddie. And I position myself right there, right in front, and they start clapping. Will you do me a favor? Just simulate a clap for me. Stop your applause. Go ahead, stop your applause. Everyone had stopped. And I didn't know why, but it abruptly stopped. It didn't stop like yours right now. Next thing I know, I hear, oh my God, his shorts fell. I'm in a walker. I don't have hands. I'm just so thankful I wore underwear that day. So I'm in St. George, Utah, Mormon country, in a full restaurant, pants down. Jim's just staring, doesn't know what to do. His wife's next to him and he's all, what do I do? And I hear her from behind, pick them up! Next thing I know, he's lifting up my shorts. A couple days later, I have a bunch of social media requests from a lot of college girls.
Together we win, together we lose. Storm on me, storm on three. 1, 2, 3, storm.
So I was wondering if there's ever been a moment in your life where you have felt stuck.
Stuck in life. Well, yeah, waiting for the Cleveland Browns to win a Super Bowl.
But bucket all, I got to work on my bucket list.
I'm living on borrowed time. Dancing is on my bucket list, so I'll just learn how to dance. So the same weekend I started chemo, I started dance lessons. And I decided on my bucket list I'm going to laugh and dance my way through chemo and recovery and all that. And I did.
Like them old stars, I see that you've come so far.
What I didn't know is everything I was going to learn on the other side of that list, on the other side of that check. Because I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to just laugh and dance. I didn't know I was going to get addicted to laughter, addicted to happiness. I didn't know I was going to keep anger away and depression.
After our dad got divorced, lost the house, lost his job, he became very depressed. Yes. And then he found bucket list.
Just like that, see?
And then he found bucket list. That's what.
He never acted stuck. You never would have known. I never would have known that he was stuck. The only way I can explain it is when he got cancer, he was like, cancer's not going to stop me. Cancer's not going to be the thing to bring me down. Cancer is either going to have to try to keep up or kick rocks. But he was always positive. The only time I can think of when he felt stuck was when he couldn't communicate, his last day on earth. That's the only time I felt that he was stuck, because he couldn't help others and he couldn't explain his feelings, and I know that must have hurt him in a way, but he did. His last words were, "Live a great story." So in the end, he wasn't stuck anymore.
That was awesome. Going on Jeep safaris, I know what it's like to be stuck, but I had a bunch of great friends, and we had a different perspective on getting stuck and getting unstuck. We could not crack the beer cooler until someone got stuck. Can you imagine that? And then, when someone got stuck, everything stops. Beer coolers pop open. Sweet! We're stuck. This is awesome. How are we going to get unstuck? Oh, let's make some plans. Da, 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 da. What if we did that in our lives today? Like, oh man, it's been a hard week. You know? A lot of people will go, it's been a tough day. It's been I need a beer. And they're like, oh, woe is me. Could you imagine flipping it around like this and going, dude, I had a horrible day. I got stuck. What are we going to do? Pop a beer with me? Let's go. Let's figure this bad boy out. That's the perspective to have.
Dale became a really good friend. After the second Unstuck Happiness Conference, we got together and set a goal. We were going to do an Unstuck conference in all 50 states. Of course, that would be the last conference we would ever do together. I was blessed to be able to be there with him his final weekend. He was in the hospital in Phoenix, surrounded by family and loved ones, and it was there that I had one of the most amazing experiences of my life, and I will never forget it. There was somebody by Dale's side almost every moment, and it was Sunday night, the night before he passed, and he was kind of fading in and out. We couldn't tell if he was responding or if he was hearing anything that we were saying. And there was a moment where there was nobody by his side. I went over and I just grabbed his hand to talk to him. And I told him, I said, Dale, I know you know what's going on. And I know that you know where you're going. And I promise you, I'm going to continue to do Unstuck Happiness conferences, and we'll do one in every state. And I will make sure that we play your message at every conference. But I need you to do something for me. Now, I can't tell if he's hearing me at all or not. I'm just holding onto his hand, and I said, I know you know where you're going. And I need you to do me a favor. When you get there, give my little girl a hug for me. He reached over, grabbed my arm with his other arm, pulled himself up, eyes popped open, looked right at me and said, I can't wait to meet her. I'll never forget that moment.
My stepmom, Linda, gave me the best advice anybody could have ever said. She said, if you want to help yourself, go help someone else. So I did. So at this point, I was crying into my dog every single day. This is Akasha. And I decided to take her out and have just a fun day. So we went to Petapalooza. And I was talking to these people from FUPE. It's Foreclosed Upon Pets. They were telling me that because of the economic times that we were in, people were leaving their animals behind in foreclosed houses, basically to die. I couldn't even imagine that. My dog, she has been with me through all of this, and she's been my strength. So I asked the volunteers, what do you need? How can I help? And of course, the answer was money. I didn't have any of that. I was going through a bankruptcy and my own house was in foreclosure. But I figured I could raise some money. And I racked my brain, what can I do? Yard sale. So I hosted a yard sale. The only problem was I didn't have any stuff to sell. I called everybody I could think of, and the donations started coming in by the truckload. My parents' garage was filled to the ceiling with donations. And we raised $1,000 for the organization. And I was hooked. We talked a lot about our why today. This is my why. These animals got me through the roughest part of my life, and I will spend my last breath rescuing them. When I met John Polish, he gave me the opportunity to share my story. Being a part of the Unstuck conferences and this documentary has meant the world to me. I get to help people and show them that there is life after divorce, but life after tragedy. Sharing my story has been difficult, and in the beginning, I didn't necessarily want to tell people exactly what happened to me. Every time I get up on stage and I tell my story, people approach me and they tell me theirs. They share what's happened to them, and they tell me how much my words have inspired them, how I've made it okay for them to feel what they're feeling, and how I've motivated them to make a change in their own lives.
One of the things that's important to note when you attend an Unstuck Happiness conference is that you don't have to be perfect to share your story. Every person that takes the stage at an Unstuck Happiness conference still gets stuck. There's still emotions that they have to deal with. And the way I look at that is, if you've ever had your car stuck in the mud, once you got it out of the mud, chances are you drove the car again, right? Probably wasn't anything wrong with the engine. It probably rode perfectly after it was out of the mud. But if you look close enough, you can still see some mud on the tires. And every one of us still have mud on our tires. We're not perfect. We haven't completely overcome. But that idea of sharing your story to help others is actually part of our healing process as well. I think it's just as important to be sharing your story as it is for people to come and hear it.
I returned home, and life was quickly an adjustment period for me. I mean, my whole life I was very independent, and then now coming home and now not having hands and feet. There were so many things that I was now going to need help of others that I could no longer do for myself. For example, one of the things that is very, very difficult to do is just bathing. Sometimes, the bathroom is not set up for a person with disabilities with no hands and no feet. And so a lot of times I have to rely on others to help set up, even just to turn the handle to be able to bathe me. There are so many things that are difficult now for me without having hands and feet. I used to be the one that used to cook, and just things are a little bit more difficult, so we have to organize our lives around the things that I'm able to do and not able to do. for example, like I said, cooking, in addition to washing clothes. I used to be the one to wash clothes, iron my clothes, and so on. Now I have to rely on others to have it for me. And myself and my family and my kids, we've adjusted as best as we can under the circumstances that I live under now.
Just because he had lived his bucket list, or just because any of us got through things, doesn't mean we're all okay. So what you guys are doing is brave. It's not easy. What you do every day without your dad is not easy. I was 37 when I lost my mom, and I still want to call her every day. You know, it doesn't get easier.
It's not fair. My dad had 2 grandchildren, my 2 kids, and he's missing everything. And it sucks. It makes me angry, but at the same time, you can't live your life that way. My dad, and any time you're in a stuck, horrible moment, that's not life. Life is meant to be enjoyed and cherished. And even in the darkest moments, there's always a silver lining. He's my hero. If my son can grow up to be half the man my dad was, I will be happy. And if my daughter can love as much as my dad loved, then I did my job.
Got him in there and in there. I mean, I needed him by my side a little bit more, and I even got a little tattoo. Got the Jeep chair I'm named after, you know, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, look good.
It's my hope that people can see that we're just real people sharing our stories to try to help others, but we still get stuck. I'm still grieving the loss of my daughter and my mom and Dale as a partner. But I think the most difficult thing for me is knowing that my actions have hurt others along the way. See, for most of my life, the only strategy I had for dealing with adversity was to shake it off and get back in the game. So I did all I knew how to do. I put them behind me and moved on. But here's the thing. Even though I moved on, I was still dragging them along with me. It was still holding me back, I just didn't realize it. Well, in 2009, I didn't have the emotional intelligence that I have today. I knew nothing about it. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. Put it behind me and move on. Except this time, the burden was just too heavy. I couldn't move forward. And I knew I couldn't stay here. What could I do? I don't know. I can't go forward. I can't stay here. But I can go over here. And I go over here. And I can do anything possible to distract myself so I don't have to deal with the emotions that are going on there. Those distractions, they're easy to find. In fact, I would say that resilience is easy. It's easy to be great when your back's up against the wall. It's when you're alone afterwards and you have to deal with yourself and your issues. That's where it gets challenging. Back when we lost Abby, I had no emotional intelligence whatsoever. My main goal at that time was to get life back to normal as quickly as possible and to find some way to be happy again. Remember, I said I was suffering through what I call the functional depression. I thought I was okay, but really I wasn't. I was looking for anything that I could do to distract myself from my problems. And I didn't understand at the time how much everyone around me was hurting. I was just trying to get life back to normal. I was trying to find some way to be happy. I was looking everywhere for distractions, and I found them. I eventually ended up cheating on my wife and costing me my marriage. It would take years before I was able to look back and see how much she needed me. how I wasn't there as a support. And in fact, I was being selfish. I was just trying to find any way to keep my mind off the problems that I was having. And in doing so, I created so many more problems. If I have any regrets, it's that I've hurt others along the way, that I hurt her. And it would take a long time before I realized that I had to open those boxes and deal with what was inside. I would have to find ways to forgive others, forgive myself, to find the lessons and use them for good, and to just let go of some of it. I wanted to stay connected to the emotions, but I was tired of carrying it all around with me. So I did find one strategy that served me pretty well during this time, and I continue to use it today. You may have heard me talk about this concept of scheduling your pain. Scheduling your pain, that sounds weird, right? Who would want to schedule pain? But let me explain to you what that looks like in my life and how it's helped me. You see, I've gone through a lot of trials in my life. I've had some circumstances that have set me back. And yeah, a lot of times I want to be able to get over it and move on. But there's some circumstances in my life that, to be quite honest, I don't want to get over. I never want to get over the loss of my daughter. It's a fine line. I don't want to get over it. I want to remember her. I want to honor her. I want to feel the emotions that I felt in that moment as I was losing her. From the moment she was born to the moment she passed away, those moments live with me forever, and they keep me connected. They've made me who I am today. But by the same token, I don't want to be stuck in it. So how can I remember and feel and carry out those emotional scars with me, but not be stuck in my circumstances? It's hard. So I've come up with this concept of scheduling my pain. Every once in a while, I'll just put it on my calendar. You know, next Saturday, I'm going to feel bad. It sounds ridiculous, but let me tell you what it does for me. When that Saturday comes, I go sit in a park, get away from my house, because I do believe that emotions tend to attach themselves to their environment. So if you're one of those people that journal a lot about all the bad stuff right before you go to bed, be careful, because that area could possibly be attaching those emotions to it. So I strongly believe, get out of your house. Go find a nice quiet spot in the park. And that's the time that I spend and I think about my daughter. I think about any of the other tragedies, any of the disappointments, failures, losses, regrets. That's the time for me to feel bad. I get emotional during that time, sure. But when I leave the park, I leave the emotion behind. I know I can always go back there. It's there waiting for me. It doesn't go away. But it gives me the opportunity to focus on the positive, to look into the future rather than looking in the past. It gives me a renewed sense of spirit, but it allows me to never get disconnected from the emotions that have made me who I am today. See, I don't believe for 1 second that my daughter passed away so that I can stand up here and talk to people about being happy. But I do know that it's through those experiences, because of the opportunities that have come my way, because I've been able to pick up and move forward, that I am now blessed with the opportunity to talk to people about getting unstuck, about not letting their circumstances dictate your happiness. And now I get to help other people find their happiness. So when you get an opportunity, put it on your calendar. Go feel bad for a while. Give yourself the grace and permission to feel bad. But when it's over, understand that those things that you feel bad for are the things that have made you who you are today, and you can use those to make a difference in your life and in the lives of others.
Now what? Lay there in bed? Stay there? You know that all those kids I've taught, all those adults that I've been, working with and so on, if I would have decided that day that I was going to stay down, no one would have said a thing. They wouldn't have said, they would have just said, oh, poor Eddie, he lost his hands and feet. I've met, in my journeys, I have met people that have lost a finger and they're devastated. Devastated. So they call me in. I walk into the room, no hands, no feet. Next thing you know, that guy's going, I don't know why I'm so I'll be fine. That's it. I'll be fine. So, it's one of those things, it's a matter of perspective.
It was a gift. I'm so grateful. Like, I can't even, like, that's not just like a line. I'm just so amazingly grateful that this happened. I just want you to know that there's always hope. There are people out there that will help you. But most importantly, there are people and animals out there that need your help. For me, doing good for others was the best possible thing I could have done for myself. It gave me a purpose. It built up my self-confidence. It just gave me a reason to be.
It's one of the best feelings in the world is when you're in your vehicle, you're in either mud or sand, and you're giving it your all, okay? There's this point, whether it's sand or mud, where it becomes super challenging, and you have your foot to the floor, and the engine's just going, wah! Right? Mud's flying, sand's flying, and you're barely even moving. Like, it sounds and it feels like you should be doing 70 miles an hour, and you're doing like 1. Anybody else experienced that before? Yeah. And you're turning it, and you bump your partner, and you guys are rocking back and forth, and whatever you got to do, and you're just moving a little bit at a time, just a little tiny bit, and you can't stop. If you hit the brakes, you're done. You'll never get going again, not without a bunch of help. So twisting the wheel, whatever you have to do, and then it finally starts to grab. You can start to feel it, even in the seat while you're sitting in there. All of a sudden, it grabs and takes off. That is a rush when it finally grabs and launches you forward. It's like this victory you didn't even expect. You didn't know what was going to happen. Am I going to be stuck or I'm not? But I'm giving it my all. That's that momentum.
One final thought that I'd like to leave you with today. Remember this. As long as you are willing to work the gas pedal, God can work the steering wheel, but he doesn't move parked cars.